Hello, BookTube. This is something very rare on this channel. This video is a retake. As you know from the stunningly unprofessional atmosphere at this channel, I don't usually do retakes. But I tried to make this video, and I did actually make this video. I got it all the way to the end, and by the end I was so toweringly frustrated that I had interrupted myself many times. By the end of the video, of the first version of this video, the whole of the content was just a pretty much uninterrupted rant against technology. The one thing that is guaranteed to send me spiraling into the outer fringes of anger. I tried two pieces of technology, two new pieces of technology for the first version of this video. That was insane. That was just an insane decision. And I got to the end and I tried my best to joke about it, but then I thought, you know, as I was calming down, I thought, no, they have enough to put up with on this channel without going through that. Just redo the video with a 10-year-old iPad and a 10-year-old MacBook Pro or MacBook Air. Go, instead of using USB-C new technology, use 10-year-old technology. That might be boring, but never fails. So that's what I'm going to do. And the video is a look back at February. It's sort of a depth gauge of February. A progress report for what my reading month was like in February and showing you a few of the books from that month. Not the exact kind of thing that I've ever done on this channel, but I thought it might be of interest to you. Especially since I was going over my February when I was rearranging my new book shelf. I was mentally going over my February. So I'm going to do this video again, and this time neither the filming technology nor the iPad is going to fail. Neither one is going to cause any problems, so I don't have to devote any energy to that. And I don't mind repeating myself. So my February reading month was pretty good. I read, at the time of this filming, 114 books, and as you can tell from that number, I'm hoping to get that up to a nice round 120 before the month is actually over. I still have plenty of time. I'm going to be reading all afternoon. I'm going to be reading all night. I'm going to be reading all day tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday. Nothing will be open. There will be no mail. So I'll have precious little in the way of distractions. The ground is covered in snow. It's going to be seasonable today, seasonable tomorrow, then Monday bitterly cold. And then after that, the temperatures will go up into the 40s until they keep going up into the 50s and 60s. So the snow will be a distant memory in very little time. But right now, it's inhospitable walking for both Frida and myself, so I don't anticipate much in the way of distraction. I'm pretty sure I can get that number up where I want it to be for February. And of the, at the time of this filming, the 114 books that I've read, I think the count that I had was something like 33 or 34 of them were rereads. So a healthy percentage, but still the majority by far were new releases. And it's new releases that I want to show you this time around. Mostly new releases in the mainstream book publishing market. Although if you like this kind of thing, I look back at the month. At first my instincts were telling me don't do it because February books are ancient history. And then I remembered that's reviewer thinking. That's not ordinary reader thinking. You aren't thinking that February books are ancient history. February is still the month. Not many of the rest of you are looking at April and May books thinking they are the things you should be concentrating on. So there are plenty more February books that we could talk about. And I also wanted to concentrate for the 10 or so books that I'm going to show you right now on books that I can say at least something positive about, rather than the very large number of just complete excoriations for February that I could give you instead. February had a lot of really, really bad books in it. Not nearly as many as March. March is shaping up to be a fairly large publishing month, the first one of the year, in terms of interesting books, ambitious books, good books, and also bad books. There are a surprising, revolting number of full-throated defenses of the end of America, of the end of the American experiment, coming out in March from American publishers who really ought to know better. They really ought to have turned these people away in shame rather than give them a book contract. To write a book about really maybe democracy has run its course. Maybe we should be a dictatorship, provided my guy gets to be the dictator. Books like that should not appear, obviously. And if they do appear, they should appear in neo-fascist journals outside of the United States. But nevertheless, there's a great amount of that coming in March. Not so much of it in February, but even so, for this list, I wanted to try and concentrate on things that you might be interested in. So we'll do some of them. No, not all of them will be full-throated endorsements, but they all have their points of interest, starting with this first one. This is by Garrett Graff. I think we saw it on this channel before. This is Watergate, A New History. And this is not the Watergate history that I was hoping for. It's good. There are gaffes, there are missteps, there are factual errors. And also there's a kind of a quippy superficiality to too much of it that I just didn't do it for me at all. I didn't get on well with the tone of the book at all, which can mean something in a history, especially this is meant to be a narrative popular history of the subject. Tone wouldn't really matter if this were, a scholarly monograph on the subject of Watergate, but it's not. It's meant to be for you, for me. And as such, I can recommend it as a relatively reliable overview of the subject, but I could do the same thing for the Wikipedia articles on Watergate. This was not what I was hoping. The big, sumptuous, highly detailed, really good, beautifully written history of Watergate that I'm hoping for in the 21st century has not appeared. I was hoping this would be it, and it's not. And the next one is The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. This is a book that we've mentioned on this channel before. It's, I think, the author's debut, and it's a novel, the story of a young black classical musician, a violinist, who's prodigiously talented even before he comes into possession of a Stradivarius, which unlocks all the extra levels of his talent. And just as the novel begins, the Stradivarius is stolen. It goes missing. At first, the main character is not even aware that it's been stolen. He thinks maybe it was misplaced somehow. A famous example in Yo-Yo Ma's history of a priceless violin being misplaced and then returned. But it quickly turns out to be a crime with suspects and red herrings and all that. And that's one line that runs throughout this book. And the other line that runs throughout this book is the experience of a young black classical music performer, even someone as talented as our main character. The author really shines a spotlight on the fact that there are virtually no headlining black classical musicians in America, and what that is like for the musician, what that's like for their family. That part of the novel, that aspect of the novel, was extremely well nuanced. I have thought a lot about this book since I read it. I did not review it. One of my freelancers reviewed it for Big Canoe News in northern Georgia, but I read it, and I read the advanced copy, and then I read the finished copy, and I thought, okay, I kind of get this. Kind of one and done. It's pat. I kind of get this. But I've been thinking about it. It's been sticking with me, especially a couple of realizations and a couple of scenes in here. So I can definitely recommend it. I think it will stick with you as well. Then we have Isaac Butler's book, The Method. This is a history and an analysis of method acting in American theater. The author is a director in American theater. And this is everything that you would want it to be. If you are a theater person or, God forbid, an actor, you need to read this book. It is just full of incredible stories, anecdotes, and also insights into the nature of method acting. For those of you who don't know the term, method acting is when the actor decides to be the part rather than simply learn the part. They throw their being into the part. A notorious example in current day would be Daniel Day-Lewis, who, when he was on the set of Steven Spielberg's movie Lincoln, insisted that everyone on set refer to him as Mr. President. Not because he actually thought he was President Lincoln, but because he was in the part. And the same thing is true with Gangs of New York. When he played Bill the Butcher, he stopped bathing, smeared, period accurate pig grease in his hair, so that after a few days of him coming to the set that way, he was filthy, rank, disgusting to everyone on set with him. That sort of insanity is method acting, where you get into the part, you become the part. His most famous send-up is maybe apocryphal, the story from Marathon Man, the movie Marathon Man, where a young Dustin Hoffman, who was at the time very much a method actor, I don't think he is anymore, but the good ones always outgrow it. Then you've got psychos that don't. But he was emoting himself into an aneurysm on the set of Marathon Man, and the possibly apocryphal story goes that Laurence Olivier, who was his co-star in that movie, quipped, why doesn't he just act instead of doing all that business? I, of course, as you can tell, am no fan of method acting. I think it's nonsense, incredibly narcissistic nonsense. But boy, oh boy, what a book this is. Every anecdote, every story, every insight into what it is and how it's different from other kinds of acting. Just, I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It's one of the handful of books on this list that I can't recommend strongly enough. The next one here is by Julie Bogart. Did not expect to like this book as much as I did. This is Raising Critical Thinkers. The subtitle is A Parent's Guide to Growing Wise Kids in the Digital Age. And that's all it's about. It's about instilling the tenets of critical thinking in young people. How you test what you think you know. How you test what other people claim to know. How you assess your own thinking on a subject. Does the fact that I'm sure mean this is true? All that sort of stuff, all tested here against the crucible of social media, which the kids of the parents who will buy this book have grown up with. They didn't learn it. They've grown up with it. One of their earliest pieces of memorized identification was not their last name or their street address or, God forbid, their phone landline, but their access codes, their passwords to various sites. And this author does a fantastic job of walking parents or prospective parents through all of that in this book. This is just amazing. I'm not a parent, except to two dogs who don't know anything about critical thinking. My Deb and I have never chosen to keep any of the children that she's popped out like party favors. We figure that it's a rough world. They're going to have to learn that sooner or later. So we just brought them to the dump and let them fend for themselves. But if you are a parent, you've got to read this book. What an amazing tour through this subject. The only concern that I had when I was done with it is one that I've repeated on this channel a few times. I'll repeat it again. I don't think any of you are paying attention, but I don't think any of you are taking it seriously, but I'll repeat it again just so that my own conscience is clear. That I wholeheartedly urge you to read this book and follow a lot of this author's advice on how to raise critical thinkers. The only clarification that I would add to the end of that is don't raise them in America. Get your passport in order, make sure their passport is in order, and then emigrate. Raise your critical thinkers in France or Switzerland or Holland. Raise your critical thinkers somewhere else. Do not raise your young critical, or don't attempt to raise your young critical thinkers in America after 2024. That would be my only clarification, but you're not going to pay any attention, so I'll just leave it at that. But the rest of this book, oh my, just fantastic. Hi, baby. Hi. Am I raising a critical thinker? No. 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 Her brain is different. She can't do critical thinking. But there's a whole bunch of stuff she can do that you can't. So look at that face. I look at that face all day long. Anyway, let's just move on here. We have the luxury of technology that will not fail. That is just great. This was a good decision to do this again. The next one is one that we've seen on this channel. This is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. And this is a novel in which a woman is invited to share or to use her brother's apartment in Paris. And once she gets there, he's not there. And once she gets there, she immediately starts to wonder all sorts of things that she wasn't expecting to wonder. She has things of her own to do in the City of Light. She was kind of expecting to concentrate on them. But the apartment doesn't seem like anything her brother could afford. And it also doesn't seem like it's the kind of place where he would live. And everyone in the building has thoughts on the subject and eyes on the apartment. And a fairly standard thriller spirals out from that opening, but it is delightful. I mean, it's not new ground. No new ground is being broken here, but it is delightful. You will, if you are in the mood for a contemporary thriller, I think you'll love almost everything about this. Like The Violin Conspiracy, it has a couple of missteps here and there, of the type that you just have to forgive. Almost all the books on this list have missteps of one kind or another, except for this next one. This is Otherlands by Thomas Halliday. This is one of the strongest recommendations on this list, where the author looks at the various earlier worlds of Earth. Still the same planet, but different continents, different atmosphere components, different ice caps, different ocean levels, different life forms, different everything. He reconstructs them as much as with the paleontological knowledge that we have will allow. It takes a few leaps of intuition or creative license, and he wraps it all in such amazingly engaging prose that this is just an incredible work of popular science. Just incredible. If you like this sort of book, you are going to love this example of it. I'm trying to position the book so that you can still see the bean. I know you want to see both. This is fantastic. I read it as an ebook, but I would love to have a print physical copy of this. Maybe I'll make a special request just in case. Then the next one is also great popular science writing, but it's also social writing as well. This is Kelly Wheel, and this is Off the Edge: Flat Earthers, Conspiracy Culture, and Why People Believe Anything. And the crux here, the main focus of, at least at the beginning of the book, is what the title suggests, which is Flat Earthers. A weird, fringe, psychotic movement that really took off when Donald Trump came to be president. No idea why. Of people who believe that the Earth is flat. There were proponents before that, especially a virulent anti-Semitic named Eric Dubay, who's still the crown prince of flat earthers. They lap up everything that he says while seeming to want to distance himself from why he says it. The heart of the real movement of flat earthers is anti-Semitism. The bad guys here are the Jews. Most of the if you want to call it popular flat earth proponents on YouTube, for instance, where it flourishes, don't acknowledge that. They don't dig deep enough into why Eric Dubay says any of the things that he said for 10 years to figure that out. Nevertheless, if you're in bed with the devil, you can't claim ignorance. But the idea here is the title comes from the phrase that's often thrown at flat earthers, which is that if the earth is flat, can you fall off the edge? And flat earthers are of multiple opinions on the subject. Some of them will say it's an infinite plane, it doesn't have an edge. Some will say we don't have any idea, we don't know. Others will say there is an edge, but you can't get to it because the governments of the world, all of whom are secretly run by Freemasons, which is Eric Dubay's code word for Jews, will prevent you with gunships, so that you can't ever get to the edge to see what would be there. But the book takes off from there to a whole bunch of other conspiracy theories. And does a wonderful job. It's at its strongest when it's looking at the role that social media plays in propagating all of this nonsense, and weakest in looking at the biggest single vector of conspiracy theory, paranoid, weirdo misinformation anywhere on the planet, which is not Joe Rogan, it's Donald Trump. And the book doesn't lay enough emphasis on that, in my opinion. But still fantastic, especially, I would think, I'd hate to think that this is true, but especially if you actually have someone in your family who has fallen down one of these rabbit holes, this book will do a lot to help you understand them. Then this next one is fantasy. I'm trying not to block the baby's face. This is Marlon James's new book, Moon Witch, Spider King. Really wish these had different titles. This follows, I have no idea what the title is. I've read it twice, but Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I hate Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger titles like that, just hate them, especially when they don't make any sense. The first one didn't make any sense in the contents of the book. This one doesn't make any sense in the contents of the book. I think it's meant to be evocative. That's okay. But the titles notwithstanding, I forget also the name of the series of these books. I think it's Dark Star or something boring like that. But these are terrific, transformative fantasy novels. They really don't seem to owe much to anything else that's out there, which I think was part of Marlon James's whole goal with this, was that you would be reading a fantasy the like of which you had not really read before. I, of course, raised a skeptical eyebrow about that with the first book, but it managed to do that. And I like this book even more than the second book. When it comes to recommending the book to you, I certainly recommend the series, but if you haven't read the first book, this will make no sense to you at all. So I would recommend going back to, what was it? Something. Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I'd recommend going back to that and reading that. That's probably out in paperback by now. And then come to this. But I had to mention this one because I liked it so much. Then this next one was a surprise. This is Lincoln and the Fight for Peace by John Avlon, who is, bright-colored books are going to be tough. No blaming the technology for this one. It's just going to be tough. It's all white cover. John Avlon, you might know him. He's a sometimes talking head on cable news. And as a result, I expected that this book would just be MSNBC talking points filtered through the past and laid at Lincoln's door, which I hate. I don't like it when the radical left does that. I don't like it when the radical right does that. I don't like it when Bill Riley writes books that he calls history. I don't like it when Glenn Beck or anybody else writes crap like this, or any of the Fox News hosts who have books like this ghostwritten regularly. I was expecting that, and there's a part of that that's in here, but I think John Avlon does a more intelligent job than I was expecting. If you have a sweet spot for Abraham Lincoln books or American Civil War books, and you're looking at this and you're thinking, okay, well, but this is just going to be some on-air hairdo, reaching back into the past in order to project an ideology that he wants to make a point, that Lincoln was for Trump or whatever, something like that. You've seen, I know you know the kind of books I'm talking about. If you are interested in Lincoln, you're looking at the books and thinking, Okay, is this one of those things? It's not quite. I think it would probably repay some effort on your part. Then the next book, I'm going to show you the UK cover. The US cover is simply not available online. I have no idea why publishers do this. I have no idea why I allow it to happen. It's hurting them, materially hurting them. That a quick internet search, which is, let's face it, the only kind of internet search anybody's ever going to do. A quick internet search does not turn up the cover of this book in the US edition. I didn't worry about it quite so much because we actually saw the US cover on this channel. I got the finished copy, I got the advanced copy, we talked about it a couple of times. But looking back at the month of February, I wanted to sing its praises. Just be aware, if you're shopping for this book in America, it won't look like this. This is Index, A History of the, by Dennis Duncan. And this is a history of the index, the lexicographical tool at the back of the nonfiction books that are on your shelves right now. And it's incredibly good. The subtitle is A Bookish Adventure, and that is totally true. It's tremendous fun. Taking you through the history of the index, when people came up with this idea, how it was shaped over time, the different kinds of indexes, the different kinds of rhetorical jobs that different indexes can do. I've been using indexes, of course, I'm a reviewer, so I've been using indexes for half a century, very industriously, and I learned a lot about this book and had a great time doing it, too. This is a tremendously enjoyable bookish book. So it won't look like this, but if you've seen it, if you see it on your bookshelves in your library or in your new bookstore, I strongly recommend it. Also, this next one is also a recommend, but far more tempered. This is House of Breath and of Sky and Breath, something of something and something, by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second volume of the sequel to her her first Crescent City book. And it's a big, sprawling, fat YA novel. All kinds of fantasy overlaid with very knowing Twitter kind of slangy humor. The characters smoke, the characters drink, the characters do the fantasy world equivalent of doom scrolling on their phones. And they're constantly quipping to each other. It's just 1,000 pages of quips. This story takes off where the earlier book left off, so the same thing with the Marlon James book. I'm not sure that I'd recommend it on its own, but any of you who've read the first Crescent City book and are wondering, is this book just as good? Believe it or not, the thing that I'm describing is good. This is a very entertaining book. It is a YA novel. The publisher and Sarah J. Maas are still lying that this is her first adult trilogy. That's absolutely not true. This is absolutely YA. There's no element of it that isn't. But that's no criticism. That's not an out-of-the-box condemnation, because YA is often very enjoyable to read in a bubblegum kind of way, and that's what this is. So if you're looking for a big, totally escapist fantasy novel, I would definitely recommend this series. I wouldn't recommend this second book. I'd recommend going and getting the $20 paperback of the first one in your bookstore. But again, I had to mention it because it was a feature of my February. I read it with interest just the other day. Then the next one came up on this channel as well, but now I've read it. This is by Heather Havrilesky, and this is Foreverland, on the divine tedium of marriage. Oh no, the reason this is not white covers, not entirely. This is the fading light. Oh no. Oh no. Well, there's nothing the technology can do about that, so there's no reason for me to get mad. We can still see the covers, and we'll just hurry it up here. This is a story, it's a nonfiction look, an autobiographical, slangy, very funny look at marriage. And I had hopes for it, and they were borne out. This is a totally delightful read. And sharp in some points. Sharp edges in some points. I think this would be a real a-hole thing to give as a gift to a newlywed. But an established happy marriage? Oh, definitely. I'd definitely do it. Okay, this next one is a little bit odd as a choice for me. This is by Daniel Hartman and Matt Rothbard, and this is Food IQ. We're slowly going to lose these covers. I wonder if this would make a difference. Does that make a difference at all? Or make it worse? Well, anyway, you can sort of make that out. This is a book, a heavily illustrated, wonderfully illustrated book about food. It's not so much a cookbook as it is an analysis of what kinds of food actually are, how they're processed, how they're produced, how they get to you, how to prepare them, yes, a little, but what they do in your body, what they do in connection with each other, what they're made of. I found it endlessly fascinating. I'm no chef, I'm no foodie, but I found this endlessly fascinating. And a lot of you prepare a lot more of your own food than I do. You're going to love this. Just love it. No effort was stunted to do this. So I found it fascinating on every page. I learned a lot, too. Then this next one is by Representative Ro Khanna, who represents, among other things, Silicon Valley. And this is his book, Dignity in a Digital Age, Making Tech Work for All of Us. A little bit ominous when a lawmaker uses a subtitle like that. And I went into this book with my hackles up a bit because I'm not 100% sure where I stand on this subject. I wanted to learn from this book, and I did learn a lot. Ro Khanna, in another age, in any other age of American politics, I would say that he had a huge future in front of him, probably the presidency. That is absolutely ruled out now. But nevertheless, he has that feel about him, and I'm sure that he believes it. I'm sure he does not believe that he and his family will be executed in 2026 in public on Fox News. I'm sure that he doesn't believe that. And the reason I say I don't know where I stand on the subject is because the digital platforms, the digital platforms that we spend so much time on that know so much about us, are private entities. And the natural impulse in previous iterations of America and in previous other maybe pluralistic democracies would be to nationalize them once they get this important. There's easily a stance to say, how on earth could something as powerful as Facebook not be nationalized? How on earth could it be in private hands? How could anyone have the power of the handful of people who have that much power today that run Apple or Google or Facebook or Twitter or whatever? It's individual citizens that have that much power. That once the power reaches that much level that it can sway elections, cause riots, there's an argument to be made that keeping that stuff in private hands is against the national interest. So I don't know where I stand, and there's also an argument to be made against that. Obviously, there is somewhere. David Murphy is screaming, and Ro Khanna dips into those waters just a little here, but he's a policymaker. He's much more concerned with the pragmatics of this. So it doesn't do quite as much of that as I would like. I'm expecting other digital books this year to do that. This is still very interesting. Probably, I admit, a little more interesting because it was done by a lawmaker, by an actual representative in Congress. If you're interested in the subject, then yeah, it's worth your time, borrowed from the library or whatever. Then this next one I mentioned before, I wanted to mention it again in a retrospective of February because it stood out. This is James Curtis's biography of Buster Keaton, who a lot of you will know the same way I did when I started this book, just from a handful of little black and white silent clips. But of course, there was a lot more to the man's life than that. And this book captures not only all the rest of what's more, this is the definitive biography, but also this book also captures in great detail the world, the Hollywood world of Buster Keaton, the cinema world of Buster Keaton. And I didn't know anything about that world going in, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating and extremely scrupulously written. I'd be surprised if this was not on my best biographies list at the end of the year. You know, the year is very young, that could change, but I'd be surprised if that weren't true. And then the last thing on this list is something that has got a little bit of play in the critical news, in the critical media. It's had some write-ups and also a couple of mentions on BookTube, so you might have already seen it, and you, of course, will know the book. This is Bambi by Felix Salten. And this is a new translation by Jack Zipes. That's what the cover looks like. We're having trouble with here because the light is actually fading. But can you make that out? Bambi. There we go. Bambi is in light green letters. The border on the side there. I believe this is a naked hardcover. I only have the ebook. Oh god, totally washed out. You just see the ghostly eyes there. Well, anyway, you caught a glimpse of it there. You can freeze the frame for the glimpse where it. Yeah, there we go. When I shift, you can see it just for a second. Jack Zipes is a well-known anthologizer, a well-known translator. He's a very good popularizer of literature, and he does a great job with this. It's a great translation and great notes as well. There's a great introduction. It sparked a lot of really interesting critical discussions. It's not the edition of Bambi that I want. Obviously, I don't want a postmodern deconstruction of this book. I don't want even a critical deconstruction of this book that places it in a Nazi framework. I want the book with lavish full-color children's illustrations. And there is an edition of that out there that I know of. I'm sure it will crop up at the Brattle Bookshop one of these days. It just hasn't yet. So I don't particularly want a hardcover of this, but I found it fascinating. I have resisted the urge to write about it. Unlike a lot of my critical brethren, I have not bothered to write about this book. I have not bothered to do that mainly because I've been watching the think pieces that have turned up about it with people trying to convince me with a straight face that they have been thinking seriously and critically about Bambi for years, and that this book came along just at the right time to give them something to write about. I've not been doing that at all. But anyway, the TLS already makes fun of that kind of critical opportunism, so I don't need to here. But it is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating. This is a fascinating edition. So if you're interested in the subject, maybe you read the story of Bambi or saw the Disney movie, and you want an edition that has teeth, an edition for adults, this is the one to get. Absolutely it is. So there you go. That was totally painless. And you got a lot of freedom, which you didn't get in the failed video. Totally painless. This just worked just fine. You just go back to 10-year-old technology, and it works just fine. So that's a little look back at February, a little status report on February. February's not done yet. I have time yet to read more books, but March is headed towards us all with a huge number of BookTube events that are coming in March. I'm looking forward to jumping into all of them and making as much trouble as I can. But I wanted to give you a little look back at February, and also, you know, an open invitation here. If you like this kind of video, then not only can I do it every month, but I'd be happy to do another one for February, right? With 10 different books. I'd be happy to do that if you want. If you want another look back at February, because February is not ancient history to most of you. Most of you are catching up on February books. You might be interested in knowing a little more about that. If you want, I'll be happy to do that. And another video I want to make sure to do is a look forward at March. A couple of those. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. This was the right decision to make this video again rather than just foist the first one on you. But it did cost me the lighting. I did run out of light. So I'm going to wrap this up before it gets any darker, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.